Hello and welcome back to Tech Comics. Today we'll be covering the grim age of American comics, which ran from the late 70s to the late 80s. Frank Miller started penciling for Marvel on issue 158 of Daredevil, and only 10 issues later he was writing the series and starting what would become the staple of grim and gritty comics. These stories were darker, more realistic, and at times bitter. Frank Miller would go on to write many other comics using the same style, some of which we'll cover later in the episode. While largely overlooked in terms of artistic and narrative quality, Pacific Comics started putting out comics in December of 1981, which would be important to the history of American comics, namely Captain Victory and the Galactic Rangers. Created by the legendary Jack Kirby, the series was the first comic book where the company allowed the creators of the work to retain the copyright, rather than the company itself. Between the treatment of Kirby in the Bronze Age and this new arrangement with Pacific Comics, other industry professionals were starting to re-examine their existing contracts and hesitating before signing any new ones, whether they were established or not. In turn, more publishers seeking to draw readership from established, popular comic creators were increasing the amount of creative freedom they were given, as well as fiscally through a moderate increase in the royalties and page rates. Then in 1984, an industry changer came forth. A black and white series so highly successful it turned its relatively unknown creators into comic stardom. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #1 was created by Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird in an attempt to parody the increasing absurdity of the grim and gritty ninja heroes popular at the time, as well as a large part of the comic industry as a whole. Not only were they huge in the comic industry, but they drew enough interest that a television cartoon was produced, massively toned down for younger audiences. Soon many other licensing opportunities arose, from cereal bowls to cereal itself, to clothing and lunchboxes, to movies and later other television series and movies, as well as a myriad of other products. The series started the black and white comic boom of the 80s, as well as being the most commercially successful, self-published superhero comic book owned by its creators of all time. It has changed hands a few times over the years since, but half of the duo still works on bringing out new issues starring the heroes in a half-shell. Then, in 1985, DC put together their first massive crossover series that would reshape the structure of their comics universe, The Crisis of the Infinite Earths. Previously, DC had a myriad of different versions of Earth and other realities used in their series, though the Crisis focused on 6 in particular which DC had visited most frequently. The series mashed the different Earths together and created one reality where all of its characters existed, killing off some of their main heroes, including the epic death of Barry Allen, the Silver Age Flash. By resetting the continuity of their comic universe, DC's staff was forced to start from scratch again when writing the history of the characters, as anything prior to the Crisis was considered non-canonical. This angered a lot of industry professionals both working for DC and just interested in its business, as well as readers across the globe. In concept, it would have been a great idea, but the publisher failed to adequately plan for consistency in the rebooted universe, as well as other complications which would lead to further restructuring later. In 1986, Frank Miller came to even greater attention as he took Batman and drew its character back to its dark origins, further even with Batman: The Dark Knight Returns. Taking place in the future with an elderly Bruce Wayne retired from the heroic vigilante life, being shocked awake from the stupor of his life to don his cowl and cape again, as well as power armor, an overpowered tank of a Batmobile, the first female Robin, and more dark twists than any reader at the time could have anticipated. While the later sequel to the series was lackluster, Batman: The Dark Knight Returns inspired a revitalization for the character and would inspire many other Batman stories, other comic series, and have an influence on other Batman licensed products such as Batman Beyond. Also in the same year, Alan Moore brought a limited series to DC called The Watchmen. Originally planned as a grim and gritty reimagining of the Justice League of America, Alan Moore restructured his first concept and developed it into a startling narrative that analyzed how the existence of heroic vigilantism and superpowers would affect the entire world, politically, technologically, and most frighteningly of all, how much closer to doomsday and world peace they could bring the planet with such a fragile facade to prevent the latter from becoming the former. Overall, the grim and gritty age had a lot of quality narrative and illustrative talent rise to the surface, as well as changes that made the industry a little more beneficial to the creators. That's all for this episode. Come back in 2 weeks for more of Tech Comics, and I'll catch you on the flip side.